I'm Nolan Beilstein, and welcome to another episode of Gen Z in Manufacturing, a podcast where I interview young people about their journeys in manufacturing, how they intend to influence the industry, and what they are looking for from an employer. For this episode, I welcome Adam Saleh, a 24-year-old CEO and founder of Presk, a design services company that helps consumers launch food products. Saleh started Presk in 2019 during his engineering design fellowship with the 1881 Institute of Technology in collaboration with NASA. Shortened from Presque-Vu, a French term that roughly translates to tip of the tongue, Presk blends a prompt-to-product workflow, 3D printing technology from Carbon 3D, and cultural intelligence to spotlight localized production stories. The company's ideal customers are athletes, independent fashion brands, musicians, and influencers. Before we hear from Saleh, please make sure to like and share this episode of Gen Z in Manufacturing. To view previous episodes, visit manufacturing.net. If you are a member of Gen Z and would like to discuss your experience in the manufacturing industry, please get in touch with me, Nolan Beilstein, at nolan@in.com. All right, Adam, well, thank you for joining Gen Z in Manufacturing. I wanted to start with something that you mentioned to me when we were having our pre-show chat. You said that a lot of companies like to use additive manufacturing as a marketing gimmick. Just kind of wanted you to clarify what you meant by that and how that method is received by Gen Z.
Yeah, great first question here. I think additive carries a lot of baggage, right? A lot of people's perceptions of additive, I believe, are kind of stuck in 2016 to 2020, that first kind of big market boom that happened there. Um, Generally speaking, I think particularly with consumer applications and CPG, the end consumer doesn't really care whether or not a product has been 3D printed or not. I think what they're looking for is a solution. They're looking for an outcome, and 3D printing is typically a means to an end, right? It gives you the right affordances, whether that's creative flexibility, uh, performance material characteristics, that kind of thing. And so oftentimes I think the approach should be selling, again, what 3D printing affords, which is creative allowances, design flexibility, and that kind of thing, rather than the fact that a product itself is 3D printed. And so what we sell to our customers and to our end consumers, again, is that design flexibility. It is the range of modularity that's unlocked through the process that we have. But sometimes we don't foreground the fact that a part is 3D printed. And that's why everyone we work with in the world of additive, we want to center around the stories that are enabled through the brand, be it Carbon or a different partner.
And how does that align with what you described as a shift from mass production to mass customization? I know you guys put an emphasis on storytelling. So how does that connect?
Yeah, how does it connect to mass customization? I mean, I think the thing here is we're seeing a relative disaggregation in consumer markets. What that means for us is people are buying less and less from these monolithic, big ticket brands, and they're buying more and more from niche individual creators that are telling stories that are more resonant. Younger generations are, they're inspired by authenticity. And in an era where ownership can be difficult because of the state of our economy, they're looking for ways to own their identity or the parts of their identity that mean a lot to them. And so that's kind of where we reach mass customization. And so one of the affordances that you get from additive is essentially zero marginal cost to change the design of a shoe or an end product, right? Whether it's eyewear, fashion accessories, that kind of thing. And so where this mass customization story comes in is, hey, instead of having a small number of really large contracts that you would typically see with, again, one of these bigger ticket brands that needs to move enough volume to validate working with a large partner, we can work with many, many smaller contracts. And so oftentimes that looks like working with emerging talent in music, emerging talent in athletics. It could be someone who did have a really large contract with a really large company and is looking to have more creative ownership over their brand. And because of the design flexibility that we get with additive, the fact that we don't have to create tooling, the fact that we can just create a digital file and push it straight to production allows us to tell more stories and reach more niche audiences in the same development period.
And I know you mentioned disaggregation in buying behavior. What Gen Z buying behaviors have you observed?
The late Virgil Abloh said that one of the biggest unlocks you can have when you're building a brand is to take something that has been already been adopted by consumers and modify it by 3%. And I think that we see that in Gen Z buying behavior now. There's a collector's economy, especially with super young generations. I know that we had talked in the previous call about this move that Mr. Beast is making to create collectibles. I take that as a pretty significant signal. I personally don't know a ton of folks, maybe in the late Gen Z category doing that, but I know a lot of Gen Alpha and young Gen Zers are interested in collectibles. This is something we're seeing with the kind of resurgence of trading, Pokemon cards and baseball cards and stuff like that, and the economy that's been created around that. Generally speaking, what I'm seeing is a lot of people want to have, again, those levers of customization so that they can make a product that feels authentic to them. These younger generations have a keen eye to, what authentic design means to them. In a lot of cases, they want a bespoke solution. And so another thing that you're seeing is also the accessibility of design tools is inflecting, right? So a lot of folks, instead of going out and getting an outsourced design team to create something for them, they're creating it themselves. And so, we see this not only in industrial design and physical products, but we see this trend happening in music. There's kind of a renaissance of new DJs, artists, producers. We're seeing this in fine art. We're seeing this in athletics. People are starting sports earlier on. NIL contracts are allowing, high school and college students to get paid. So, those folks are focusing on, hey, how do I catalyze my personal brand? How do I monetize this? And again, additive kind of provides a foundational solution to help these people monetize. You're also seeing a lot of these shops pop up on TikTok shops. People are spinning up micro factories with, desktop printers, be it Prusa, Bamboo Labs, Elegoo just released a good solution. Creality. People are spinning up these micro factories in their own home, and they're starting these micro enterprises where they're either taking in contracts and helping people create customized goods, or they're creating collectibles, right? Just kind of in line with what you're seeing with Mr. Beast. So again, I think, what matters to this younger community is, hey, how do I own my creative identity? How do I monetize it in a world where it's harder and harder to get these long-term jobs? We're kind of living in this gig economy. How do people monetize and create their own brand and own creative identity and create products that support that? And again, additive provides a perfect solution for that.
And this Gen Z urge to be creative and do something original, is that exclusive to that age demographic, or do you think it's just been allowed because of modern technology?
Gen Z has been exposed to everything through the internet. I think we all have. And I think that what you're seeing in this customization movement is a response to this long-term exposure to huge swaths of information. People are grasping for something new, and a lot of these legacy brands feel antiquated, outdated. They feel like they're telling stories that are not resonant to these younger generations. In a sense, you see a lot of media consumption trends that are around like hyper stimulation and content that is, to put it bluntly, like brain rot, right? So we're living in this economy where anything can be created quickly. And so what do you create? And then, of course, if you live in a world where, there's a huge diversity of information, then the natural diffusion is you find a huge diversity of product design.
And this mindset that Gen Z has championed, how is it reflected in how they like to work, especially in a manufacturing setting?
Yeah, we spoke about this in our first conversation. Again, I think a lot of folks are looking for a playground, right? I had a conversation with my team yesterday about, finding a delicate balance between what are the levers you can pull to create a good business, but then what are the levers you can pull to create a creatively fulfilling environment for everyone. What I'm noticing with Gen Z again is they're looking for tangibility, right? I think a lot of folks are burnt out of being in a digital first environment. Again, a lot of us grew up with technology. Some of us latch onto it, and I think that's what you see with the entire workforce of developers. But there's always the other side to this, and so I think in manufacturing, it's hey, how can I quickly get to a physical outcome, something that feels tangible, and how do I enable someone else to feel like they're unlocking, something new within their creative identity? How is this something that I can share with my community tangibly when I go to my friend's house, when I have people over, when I'm hosting? How can I bring them into the process? And so I think, a lot of what Gen Z looks for as someone who works inside of a manufacturing house is, hey, how can I be a creative therapist? How can I be a creative Sherpa for a whole group of my community? Because again, I think we're seeing a shift towards this kind of community-centric behavior. People are grasping for attention, but people are also grasping for connection. We're living in a world where loneliness is at an all-time high, and so a lot of folks are looking for the antidote to that kind of condition. And I think they find it in community. And as someone who works in manufacturing, you're always looking to bring community in. So when you're crafting a manufacturing space that you hope attracts Gen Z talent, I think the pillars that you look at is make the place playful, a playground of sorts, of course, in a safe way. But also make it a community space. Make it a space that people can bring folks into, can host events. It can be educational and bring other people on the ride with you.
You touched on it a little bit, but in this creator passion economy, just how do you guys approach additive manufacturing differently at Presk compared to the traditional operations?
What we're fighting against is consumer adoption here. There's this idea of the Overton window. It's, what is most advanced yet accessible or yet acceptable for the end consumer. And I think a lot of people, if I told them, hey, we 3D print footwear, they have an idea in their head. Some people think of that like Irish clog, something that they're going to have to clobber around on. It's going to make clacking noises on the ground as they walk. As soon as they pick that shoe up, I tell them to put it on, they put it on. And when they have that plush ride underfoot, it really changes the mental model that they have around additive. And I think that's important for convincing, not just Gen Z, but any of our customers that, hey, this is a viable path forward for this industry. And foreseeably, you can make your own logical leaps about how this could be the future of any other kind of consumer good that you can imagine in your home.
What additive manufacturing design trends do you hope that Gen Z changes, gets rid of, anything like that?
The future that I want to see is other companies kind of getting on board with selling files instead of having these, just brick and mortar stores that sell these pre-produced products. The kind of blue skies world that I hope for, and what I hope Gen Z is a part of, is pushing forward this localized manufacturing dynamic. But when I think about localized production, I think of, creative people, artists, designers that are the originating source of a community's creative capital, then, producing their parts within, 15, 20 minutes of their home. And so, I imagine brick and mortar stores changing to accommodate for this. The future that I dream for is I can go to Dover Street Market, which is, a local, fashion and fashion goods store in my neighborhood. And in their back room, they don't just have overstock, they also have manufacturing infrastructure where I can buy something in store, or I can try a pair of shoes on. I can suggest design changes. I have a designer in-house as the kind of like customer solutions expert. They can make those edits, and then I walk back to the store the next day and I can pick up that product.
Yeah, I wanted to go back a little bit to the conversation we had about making your workspace attractive to Gen Z aged workers, and I know we discussed that you had a tour of Carbon 3D, a company that you guys have a relationship with. What
Yeah.
about that tour captured your attention? And I know it led to an internship, and how did they draw you in? What about it did you really like?
Another bubble that we live in as students is that these factories are kind of aspirational spaces, and so when you enter a space like that, you hope that it mirrors that aspirational vibe. I think a lot of people, perhaps naively, kind of expect to have this Iron Man mechanical design cave that they're entering, where you're kind of flanked by cutting edge technology everywhere, and Carbon definitely mirrors that in the design of their facility. And so I think having your kind of expectations match reality is always a cool thing, whether that's feasible for you or not. That's something that definitely impacted me as a student seeing Carbon. The second thing is the tour was done by Phil DeSimone, right? And so getting kind of direct access as a student to see, interact with, and relate to the company's leadership was really important, because they're speaking directly to the vision of the product, as well as the day-to-day process required to get something done and to move the technology forward. The next thing was, in the tour that he was giving us, again, there was a lot of tactility, right? I think it's one thing to be able to show people work in progress files on computer screens. It's one thing to talk about what you're building. It's another to be able to walk through a demo room and see finished, 3D printed midsoles, to see, material tests and latticed, pucks, be able to touch it, feel it, understand the differences in material characteristics. All of these things form the cognitive connections that are required to really begin to dream about working with this technology. And I think Carbon did a really great job of foregrounding all of their work in a way that felt relatable.
Another phrase you said that I thought was kind of fascinating was anthropomorphize your space. Is that kind of what you're talking about right here?
Yeah. I think I think everyone kind of naturally does this. Our space, again, this kind of goes back to, how do you make your environment inspiring, aspirational, relatable? I'm a big Star Trek fan, grew up watching Star Trek, and so all of our machines are named after Star Trek characters in Voyager and Enterprise. This is something else that we also notice with most of the other manufacturing houses that we've visited now and in the past. I believe Carbon also names their machines. Again, I think it's like this is technology. These are machines that we're working with. But it's important to have a relationship with these machines. They require maintenance. They require upkeep. In a sense, they're living and breathing objects, right? And I think that they in order for them to command that respect, it behooves you to anthropomorphize them and give them a life of their own. And so that's something that I definitely believe in when you're thinking about your manufacturing layout, for sure.
Thank you for watching this episode of Gen Z in Manufacturing. Please make sure to like and share the episode. To view previous episodes, visit manufacturing.net. If you are a member of Gen Z and would like to discuss your experience in the manufacturing industry, please contact Nolan Beilstein at nolan@ien.com.